turned it horizontal. Oh, right.
Turn it to what?
Horizontal, then it would be like a finger on the...
There, yay.
Now we're in business.
That's cool.
Whoa. Okay, are we live?
You guys are live right now.
Oh, great.
Oh, what happened?
Oh, no.
That's okay. You can get it back. No worries.
It seems like they all need something.
We've come so far.
Right.
How that goes.
There it is.
Good luck, guys.
Thank you.
Put on a conference.
Okay.
Change the payroll.
I think it's no surprise to anyone that Austin has traffic problems. So, and stopped trains and wrecks and things like, and rush hour, stuff like that. But thanks for coming today. We are live streaming and I'll share that online shortly. Wanted to thank Courtney for coming and to speak to us and to the world through Netsquared and NTEN. They're all anxious. I wanted to, before we get too far, just to let you know we have gifts for you in these little bags.
You don't give gifts to late people?
Yes, we do,
Thank
because
you.
you took the time.
No,
But
it's no problem.
I'm gonna let Courtney do the talking because she has the best way of saying things. So thank you for coming.
I appreciate it. So today I'm talking about the Sanctuary app. I'll give you a little bit of information, some background about why we started this and why we built this app. I am a survivor of domestic violence, and about 17 years ago, my children and I lived at Safe Place Shelter here in Austin. And as we all know, Austin is a different place than it was 17 years ago. We didn't have nearly as many condos, we didn't have nearly as many people, not nearly as many traffic or mobility issues, and things were a lot smaller, including population. Well, as the city has grown, the resources in the city have not necessarily grown to meet the need. So in Austin, we have two shelters. We have Safe Alliance and we have Hope Alliance, which is up at Round Rock. One has close to, I think, 200 beds, and one has 7. So what that's leading to is a homelessness issue. Survivors of domestic violence, when they leave their violence, end up being on the streets because there's no place for them to go. They'll go to the shelter because that's where everybody has told them to go. They go and they say, you know, we can provide you some counseling and maybe some resources outside of the shelter, but as for a bed for you and your children tonight, you won't be able to have one because we're full. And I was like, that's not a thing, because I always go and speak to organizations and tell them about, you know, supporting their local shelter. And every single time I'd be speaking to a room full of people like you, and they would come up to me and say, hey, you know what, when I went to the shelter, I couldn't get in. When my sister went, she couldn't get in. And I was like, that's not a problem, that's really not a thing. And they were like, yeah, it's a thing. So I started researching it and realized that nationally, this is a problem. There is a group called the National Network to End Domestic Violence, and they do this snapshot census every year on September 14th. What that means is they go across the whole nation, and every organization that says that they provide direct services to domestic violence survivors through a shelter or some sort of program reports all of their numbers. The column we pay attention to is the unmet request column, and it basically goes down and says how many people did they not meet their need that day, meaning they didn't get to stay there. Last year, nearly 11,991 people in that one day nationally were turned away from the shelter. Here in Central Texas, it's 42%. So nearly 50% of those that will go to the shelter will be turned away just because there's no room. They'll provide them resources, and listen, I'm the biggest advocate for the local shelter, but if they simply can't get in, they're not getting the full gambit of the resources they should be getting. So, ta-da, I decided to launch this app called the Sanctuary app to provide those resources for survivors. We kind of talked about this. I call it our first responders group, so law enforcement, hospitals, schools, shelters, all of these groups are looking for a place to place these survivors when they come to them. Shelters don't want to turn people away, so they're looking for a solution that will provide them spaces. First responders are experiencing having to turn away victims at an alarming rate. And this is such a pivotal time because this is when the mortality rate goes up. A lot of survivors that will go back to their violent homes may end up, I hate to say it, but they may end up dead because they ended up going back to a violent home. So it's a very crucial time. So the need is a comprehensive solution for those first responders in that very pivotal moment to provide for survivors of domestic violence who are not homeless, but they're displaced. So when I went, I literally had a job, I had a home, I had places to stay, but literally because my abuser knew all of those things, he could show up at my job, he could show up at my home, he could show up where my friends were, so it displaced me. I literally had no place to go. I think I just shared this statistic with you, that it's becoming a homelessness issue and a quality of life problem. Because of shelter overcrowding, a lot of shelters, there's three kinds of shelters. There's shelters that, one, will take everybody, they'll put beds on floors, they'll put pillows on floors, and they take everybody that comes in. There are shelters that don't have wait lists because they just simply tell people, no, we don't have room, and then that's the end of their interaction. And then there's shelters who have wait lists, which basically is when a shelter, like if you were to call a shelter tomorrow and they said, no, we have a wait list, you have to call back every single day to find a spot at that shelter. And if you don't call back every day, you'll lose your spot on the wait list. So say you're number 49, if you don't call for one day, you'll become number 78. It's just the way it is because there's no room. Victims will bounce from one homeless shelter to the next, they'll return to violent homes, and like I shared, the victim mortality rate skyrockets to 83%. That's what's happened in the last 10 years. And nearly 1,000 victims have been murdered at the hands of their abusers in just Texas alone. So our solution, Survive2Thrive, is the foundation that I started to deal with this need. I didn't realize it was such a prevalent problem until we started researching, and in 2013 we founded Survive2Thrive with the idea we were going to meet this specific niche, not knowing how big it was. And now that we want to become a national solution, we've scaled it. We found the best way to scale it was through an app that we could provide victims with phones. They would have access to the app, and we can get them the resources that way. So even if they never saw the inside of the shelter, they would have access to those resources at all times. So the app will actually provide safe spaces for immediate escape for victims and their families, either through a shelter or a hotel inventory system, and I'll explain what that looks like in a second. National transportation options. We just signed a master enterprise agreement with Lyft to provide transportation from through their escape or to appointments, because there are several appointments that come up after. I've got to get a protective order, I've got to talk to my kid's school and I don't have transportation. So Lyft is going to help us transport our clients. 24/7 advocate support and counseling. So there's a chat interface in our app where an advocate is assigned to that client, and then they can speak to them and walk them through their strategic plan about what they need to do next. And then strategic planning with life resources. A lot of times you get it comes out at fire hose because they're trying to supply so much information to so many people that they don't explain, like, what do I do with this? And that can turn, like, any little snafu can really turn somebody around. They're just like, you know what, I'm going home, I'm done. So our advocate program is meant to help them through those obstacles and keep them moving forward. So let's see. Right now we're supplying all the funding for this resource. Okay, so this will kind of explain how the app works. When a victim is placed on a wait list, either through a shelter or they've called our hotline directly, the referring agency will give them a code for the app, and the survivor can download it onto their phone. If they don't have a phone, we're working to sign an MOU with AT&T to provide us phones, and we're actually doing a phone drive right now to get phones. And we also have access to Talkspace. Are you guys familiar with Talkspace? They're a 24/7 online counseling, because it's crisis time, right? So if they can't get in touch with a counselor, Talkspace will be our go-to for our counseling in that moment. So they refer us to the Sanctuary app, and this is actually the app here, and I'll explain more about it. Through Lyft and Families to Freedom. So Lyft is our local transportation partner. Here in Austin, we use Lyft. And most cities within 50 miles of the city center will use Lyft. If it's outside of that, we use Families to Freedom, which is a partner program out of Dallas that will fly them across the country. So say I wanted to go home to my family, which is in Massachusetts, Families to Freedom will transport me there, and Lyft can transport me locally. Does that make sense? Okay, so step 3, the victim is transported to a shelter. The first step in our app is to get them to shelter. If there is shelter space available, what we do that saves steps for the victim is they don't have to call every shelter every day and get on that wait list. We actually will provide them availability according to what that shelter says. So we're going to do the lead work for them. So in the app, for example, it'll list SAFE and it'll list Hope Alliance and maybe the 5 shelters in this area and say, okay, they've got some availability there, you need to call them right now. So that they don't have to keep calling the same shelters that aren't gonna have any space for them and waste their time. If they can't get into the shelter, then they can get into our hotel inventory system. That goes to step, let's go back. We have partnerships with a group called the Woodspring Hotels. They used to be kind of skeevy hotel. They were called value place hotels, which was for like construction workers, like migrant workers, like, so they've upgraded to business class. Now they have business class clients, so they did this huge corporate rebrand, remodeled the hotel. Why it's good is they've made it for security. So when somebody comes in, we know they have an ID attached to them, there's cameras everywhere, there's no lobbies. It makes sense for our security profile for our survivors. So we partnered with them and they have over 500 locations nationally, so that once we expand from Austin, we can expand to those hotels as well. And I'm now in conversations and working on getting some traction with HomeAway to provide that same sort of network for our sex trafficking victims. Because what we're finding is sex trafficking victims look like domestic violence victims, but they're all very different, and we have to handle them differently, especially when it comes to housing. So we're working on those 2 partnerships. Then once the victim is stabilized and in a safe place, we have an advocate assigned to them to help them build a strategic plan for what they're going to do next. Our program typically is between 1 and 5 days. So our goal through that 5-day period is to get that person placed into a safe environment, either with family, friends, or on their own, but they know what they're going to be doing next. Does that make sense? Awesome. Does anybody have any questions about this so far? Yes, ma'am.
What is Families to Freedom?
Families to Freedom is our partner program that provides out-of-state transportation. So if it's like more than 100 miles, like if somebody needed to get from here to Dallas, then they would transport them. Under that, then we usually partner with Lyft, or we transport them ourselves.
Through like airfare?
Yeah, airfare, planes, trains, automobiles, everything. They're amazing. So I had a young lady that came to us and her family was in Tucson. They flew her to Tucson, which is great. And they'll fly them to wherever their centers of, you know, safety and security are. So it's really good. Anyone else? Okay. So what's next for the app? We've demo launched and we're actually doing some beta testing. We've changed one of the cities actually. We are gonna beta test this like crazy over the next year to make sure that it works. So those first responder scripts that I explained to you, like the police officers, the hospitals, the shelters, we wanna get a lot of feedback on the data that they're collecting from this and make sure that it's valuable, because we give them a tool and it's not valuable, they won't use it. And then survivors won't be able to get access to these resources. So we're starting here in Austin, Texas. We're working in Fort Collins, Colorado. We've got a beta planned for early next year. That is not Los Angeles anymore. It's San Francisco now. That changed as of last week. I haven't changed the slide. And then Washington, D.C. We felt like those cities demographically gave us enough variety that we would really start to get some real answers like that we could share with these national organizations about victim homelessness, just from race, age, income level, all of those things go into why we chose those 4 cities to expand over the next year. Let's see. So this talks a little bit more about who's gonna buy this app. We have about 494,000 agencies across the country that could actually use this app. When we started to sit down and figure out who would actually buy this thing, and that's one thing I want to say, we'll never charge a victim for this app. We don't want cost to become the issue, but there are plenty of people that can pay for this and who actually need it that will cover the cost. Law enforcement, churches and synagogues, a lot of people run to their church when they're being abused, and then resources, and a lot of churches don't know what to say and what to do and what to offer. So this is an option. Municipalities, schools, colleges, and universities, hospitals, emergency care clinics where people might run to when they are injured during a domestic violence or sex trafficking incident, alarm response system companies, which is something that we're delving into, like actually building a panic button into like ADP or one of these companies that might actually relay this information. Emergency shelters, that number is actually different. The last number is about 1,800 shelters nationally. And then law enforcement, which is our primary market that we're marketing to right now. We know that if we get 3% of that market, it covers our operating costs for 2 years. So I think it's, yeah, which is great. I mean, we only have to deal with law enforcement, but we know that there are a lot more people that need this access. Does anybody have any questions about that?
How has the app been received by?
Good question. Law enforcement really loves this app. I went and spoke at this conference called the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and there were city managers in there, there were crime victim services folks, chiefs of police, police officers. They were all saying, when is this going to be ready, because we really need this. They have people in their cars all the time and they don't know where to put them. So they'll end up dropping them off at some random restaurant where it's well lit. They'll drop them off at emergency shelters like Salvation Army, and there's been an uptick in sexual assault at those. So we're trying to keep our victims from being re-traumatized in that situation. Law enforcement loves this app, and they're like, we want to be able to say, okay, we know 6 shelters in the area are already full. We know we can drop them off here and be met with an advocate. So they love this. Shelters, it's a little bit more of a little bit harder pill to swallow, just because we are kind of exposing something with the wait list, saying they're not meeting all of the need. But I turn it around and I spin it to say, listen, this is an opportunity for you to meet 100% of your need. You can literally give them this app and we can figure out a way to place this person. You can still be in contact with them, but this way we know that they're safe and we know that they're not being placed anywhere else. One second. And then the other place where we've gotten a lot of response with schools and colleges. They are wanting, especially with the Title IX consumption that has happened over the last 5 years, they are wanting something that is instant access, that proves that the victim, number one, is credible. This is another way of doing that, and we've gotten a lot of traction with schools and colleges. Yes, ma'am?
A couple questions.
Yep.
One is, have you had any meetings with APD or gone to Austin City Hall and talked to folks about it, or presented, or the city manager's office? That's the first question. Second is, when you update the app to have information about what the shelter capacity is,
Mm-hmm.
who's making or doing that research, and how are you keeping up with how that can change?
Absolutely. So first question, we have on our board Commander Donald Baker. He's over the domestic violence division. So yeah, and he's been helping us with a lot of data, good data that we can use to help with the app. So he's been very helpful. We're also connected with Travis County Victim Services, and they are integral. They help with getting protective orders. So they see, they're kind of on the front lines and see what's actually out there, and they've been providing us a lot of information. Also with the Family Supervisors Group through Travis County, and I've connected with a bunch of law enforcement across the country through that conference that I went to earlier this year. I do know the city manager, and I've actually spoken to the mayor about the app, so that's been working out too. We just haven't, we have to get the app demo ready for them to actually see, so. And then your second question was?
Having the research on the shelter's capacity, like how do you get that, and then how do you keep it up to date?
Right now, it's us. We're gonna manually have to do that. And that's okay. We have a person on our staff that's assigned to actually go and make those phone calls so that survivors don't have to. We have one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and one in the evening. And that's kind of what we're gonna have to do until we develop an API and shelters actually enter their own information. But we're gonna have to do it for now, which is okay. I mean, I would rather us do it than a survivor have to do it and be told no 6 or 7 times in one night, so.
Are they usually pretty open about that?
Yeah,
Okay.
now. Yeah, now that they realize, I'm like, I'm not a shelter, but I'm trying to help. And they're like, yeah, now we see. So actually, I'm working on developing an MOU with Safe Alliance here to actually do this and help, there's some confidentiality issues. There's some things that I have to comply with. So we're working on an MOU to make sure that I can get access to that waitlist information. Yeah. Oh, what happened? Oh my goodness, look at this.
There you go.
Good night. I'm just hoping, I'm hoping my son doesn't send me anything on purpose. He's a college student, what can I tell you? Let's see. So this is what our business model is. we don't want to charge victims for this app at all. So what we're planning to do is provide those first responders the full access to the web app for $999. We feel like that's not aspirational for the small shelter and not horrible for the big, because the bigger ones have huge budgets, but the little ones can't afford that. So we'll work out scholarships, we'll work it all out because we want everybody to have access to this. But that's our base model. And then $299, that's for us to do updates, make sure all the resources are correct, because sometimes you'll call and people change numbers and don't update them, so we'll be doing that and pushing it through the app so the information is up to date. We also have it on a subscription fee basis, so like you can just look it up and say, hey, I want to use your app for like today, and we can do that as well. We also have a 5-year partner buy-in at $50,000 per year, so like we're sending business to Lyft, we're sending business to Woodspring, and we're saying for $50,000 we will send all of our traffic to you, but you have to agree to sign on, and that helps us to maintain the app. So that's our partner buy-in. And then we have, I think the exclusive partnership, sponsorship buy-in is at $25,000. And again, we are seeking sponsorship dollars so that the smaller shelters that can't afford the $999, I mean, there are people who open their homes and they can't afford a $1,000 tool, but if we have one of the larger ones agree to sponsor it, good. Do you have a question? No? He just looked like he had a question. Let's see, I think I can skip this part. So this is what I was sharing with you. Our go-to-market strategy for the app is that we plan to capture each market segment of that first responders group, and we're starting with law enforcement. Due to the interest from law enforcement, like the FBI, the OVC. I just came back from Washington with the meetings with FBI. We plan to capture 3%, which is 3% of 17,985 agencies in the United States. The beta testing date has changed, but after that, that's our plan. Sorry. You're okay. You're okay. I'm just hoping my son doesn't send me anything inappropriate. I'm telling you, he's in college and he's weird and he sends me weird things. He's so weird. Okay, let's see. So this is this might be it. Oh, you can see it. Okay, so we went through and developed this competitive landscape matrix, basically saying these are the other things that are saying that they're kind of like us. This is what they provide, but across the board, this is how our Sanctuary app lines up with these other organizations. So I'll take, for example, Rapid SOS. They provide life support and victim safety, but they don't have any safety planning. They don't have these other things. Our app is the only one that provides all 8 of those things. And we've worked really hard to provide those because we know that that's what survivors need. And let me tell you a little background about Survive2Thrive. We started it back in 2013 with 6 women sitting around the table. 6 of us saying, hey, we've got to do this, what are we going to do? And we're all survivors of domestic violence. So every program that we have, including this app, was started by survivors, for survivors. This is all the things that they said, listen, this is what a person who's running from violence is going to need. So we did our research and realized there are many of them. So Safe Night, for example, is now a partner organization. We're partnering with them because they have an app too. And we're like, well, can we develop some sort of integration where we can work together? And I go back in 2 weeks to sign a partnership agreement with them. They all provide aspects of what our app does, but none of them provide live counseling support and tracking. None of them do that.
I've never even heard of these other apps.
Yeah, Rapid SOS actually, I think, is shutting down. Don't quote me on that, but they sent me the text saying that they're ceasing operations December 14th. I don't know if that's true or not. I'll find out, but that's what the email I got said.
There's just so many of them, and I'm thinking, why haven't I ever heard of any of these?
There are a lot of them, and it's a lot of static information, so nothing moving, no interaction, there's nobody on the other end of it. It's just a lot of, this is where you can find this is where you can find that, but there's no interaction, no live chat. Yeah. Did you smiling at me, Courtney?
We can talk after. I work at Texas Association Against Sexual Assault, but we're going to be working with Safe Night.
Yes. Okay,
So,
we should definitely talk.
Yeah.
Yes, because I just left Catherine probably about a month ago, and we're signing an agreement, but we should include you guys in that one for sure. Let's see. Okay, so what more should I talk about our ask? Well, we are. We're in another fundraising round, and we're asking for $500,000 in royalty-based, financing. That's not a whole ton compared to what the earned income model actually is going to generate. Over the first year, like we said, 3% of that market will generate nearly $2.4 million. So $500,000 is not a ton, and we've got some interest, which is good. And it will help us to develop the full app. Right now, we're at demo stage. We're probably ready for the first, iteration of this, but the full app needs $500,000 to make it completely. And that's where I recognize you from.
Do you have a plan that kind of includes a lot of this information, like the budget?
Yes.
It's a 500,000.
Yes.
Is it just something you would ask people to contact you and then you give it? Is it private, really?
Yeah, we try to keep it pretty hush
I'll
hush.
just say that people need to contact you.
Yes, and we'll be happy to, because we try to customize that according to who we're speaking to. So try to keep it on the low.
What is royalty-based financing?
Royalty-based financing, since we've developed this earned income model, right? So we're making money from this app. They would be able to, royalty-based means they get a percentage of whatever we sell. So each time we sell a site license, they would get a percentage of that site license. So I'm not quite sure how much the percentage is, but that's why we have a CFO, and I'm not good at that. But we would pay them back using the royalty base. Yes?
Do you guys have any events, fundraising events or anything coming up?
We have a couple. Next year we have a golf tournament for our Purple Bow Tie program, but it's not related to this. We're really going after privately investors, and it's because it's the kind of thing that we don't want hundreds of investors to be involved in. Like, it has to be a hard connection, and it has to be sticky so that they stick around, because it's going to take time for this to develop. And like we anticipate over the next 2 years, by the end of 2020, we will have the exact thing that we want based on our data and our research and the people we've spoken to.
That was going to be my question, is when is it going to be ready?
Yes. Well, this time next year, this time next year, we'll be ready to go into our next iteration of 2.0. We're planning to have 2.0 ready for next year, right around Christmas time. And then we'll do a little bit more testing, but we'll be ready to actually sell it and get it out there to clients. And then after that, we're always going to be testing this thing just to see what our customers are saying. And then we're going to go for another round of funding. Because with each round, our personnel needs will grow. And we are going national. So we're going to plan to go into these cities, but as we add more cities, we'll have to raise more funding.
And you'll have to have staff in every city.
Yes, ma'am. But you know what? We're the way we've done it, because we're poor and because we know how to make the most of the situation, is like, for example, our advocate program. Oh, what happened? Good. You are seeing everything. Good job. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it there. Because, so for example, our advocate base, those who are going to actually help the victims work through their strategic plan. And each city, we're going to have between 40 and 50 advocates ready to go, based on client need. So we've actually spoken to some colleges and universities that have students who need to get their supervision hours. Those are super expensive. They're like $50 per hour. This is supervision that, before you become a counselor, you have to go through so many supervised hours with another counselor. We are working with a counseling group to provide those supervision hours for free, and in turn, they will be our advocates. So we've actually done that in Colorado. We're actually speaking to a college there, and we've spoken to some folks here. Yeah. But that offsets the cost of personnel in that area, so we won't ever have that line item in our budget, because that alone could be astronomical. But if we continue in this way, where the advocates are actually working through our plan and through the educational system, it helps a lot. Because I can't imagine, I think it's like 3,000 hours, and that might be wrong, but $3,000 at $50 an hour, it's a lot. So it's a lot. If we can offset that cost for them and they can offset the cost for us, it's a win-win situation.
Well, could you talk about this? You said 6 women sitting around the table coming up with this, about those early days and
those days where I was like, ooh, do I really want to do this?
yeah, I'm curious.
like, girl, just
For
go
the
get her.
startups, then,
Yeah.
unfortunately, we have a lot in our
Yeah.
orbit.
Let's just say that first, there were days where Survive2Thrive may not have existed again because we were just sitting there thinking, this is bigger than us. And we had several people say to us, this is huge. Why are you taking this on? And I was just like, because there are women like me with kids like mine that are sleeping under bridges, that are sleeping in their cars. And that's not right. Like, why wouldn't you attack this problem? And every time I hit that roadblock, that why comes up in my head, and I just have to keep pushing through it because I actually see people sleeping in their cars. That to me is a motivator enough. That hits my why so hard every single day that now I'm like, I have to get up, I have to raise this money because I'm not traditionally a fundraiser. We've bootstrapped a lot of this money just because it's the right thing to do. But now that we're growing, we're gonna have to grow our budgets. Sitting around the table with those 6 ladies, realizing that we were embarking on something that was gonna truly change lives and save lives, it was a lot of tearful moments, and a lot of them are still connected with the organization today. And we've got some really powerful people who have come up because they said, you know, I was a survivor of domestic violence, but this doesn't feel like a shelter to me. This feels like empowerment to me.
Yeah.
So now I want to help you with this because this feels like you're giving a lift. It's not oh, I'm gonna keep you in this, you know, and I'm not saying shelters are trying to, but I'm saying this feels more like a push forward than the traditional shelter model. Yeah.
I like that you have a Guide Star profile and that you're platinum.
Yes.
Not very many people take the trouble to do that, and I work with nonprofits all the time. I get them to gold. I
Yeah.
can barely get them to,
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
But when they do get to platinum, which is the best of the best, it's like really a great endorsement. And
Thank you.
just that transparency, I just want to say thanks for doing that.
I appreciate it. I mean, right now, I mean, it was when we got that rating, I was just like, really? They were like, yeah, really, we did, and it was awesome. Well, and last year we won the ethics award from
Yes.
Recognized Good, which was awesome. I think it's just a testament, and it speaks to the fact that we are working right from here.
And professionally, really professionally.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's why I think you have a really great future for this app.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a code of ethics that keeps us all on the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Questions?
One more.
Yes,
Where's the technical expertise coming from?
Oh, my husband's a nerd. I'm just kidding. Well, yeah, nerds.
That's NTEN, Crown.
Well, hey, I'm just gonna say, keep it up. My husband is an electrical engineer, and we get into many arguments. I mean, y'all, many arguments, because he's like, well, why don't you do this? Why doesn't this? Like, he's a process person, right? So he's just like, why don't these people talk to these people? And I'm like, Gary, I don't know. Like, why? Can you just go to bed? Like, just stop asking me questions. But he asked me a lot of questions because he's like, well, we could do this and we could do that. So this is literally my husband's brainchild. I can't take all the credit for it. He's our CTO, and he's the one who said, there has to be a way to grow and scale this company other than making more buildings. This is not brick and mortar. Technology can solve this problem. And then he and I started coming up with these different scenarios, and that's how it evolved into this. So Gary Santana, my nerd, my electrical engineer, helped me to develop this, and I'm thankful for him. Yeah.
Very awesome.
Yeah, he is pretty awesome, and he is a nerd.
Okay, everybody, spread the word on social media so she can get her investors. You have
Yes,
investors, you have
we're
to.
so close, and we just had a conversation with a pretty big investor here in Austin, and
Great.
he was like, we could probably get you that before the end of the year. I was like, what? So I'm excited about that. Because it's so funny to hear an investor say, yeah, we could do that next week, and I'm like, you know, it's good news. It's not like, I'll give it to you Q2 of next year. But that person understands the homelessness epidemic. So they're just like, yeah, we're seeing the numbers rise here in Austin. And it's funny because I thought this was just going to be for domestic violence survivors, but it's spreading itself. So the second part of this is we started this empowerment center called the Sanctuary Center over at the Center for Social Innovation. So we have 2 suites. One suite is for sex trafficking survivors, and one is for domestic violence survivors. And basically, we just provide them tools and connect them to different resources. We open January of next year. And it's kind of a companion piece to this app, so it's all about the empowerment portion. I just believe that we are so resilient and so resourceful and so powerful already that all you have to do is give somebody a tool and tell them how to use it. They're going to use it. And if they hit any roadblocks, there's support. But you don't have to drag them along, because dragging them along is going to wear you out, it's going to wear them out. And they're not interested. True.
A couple questions for me. Just, I was thinking about like the hotel pairing and stuff, and
Yes.
like how that would be funded, and then also the second piece was, so it's in beta now, which means that you do have people testing it. Do you have any survivors kind of like how would you actually roll it out and actually get survivors to test it, like give feedback and stuff?
We are developing a survivor focus group for it. Yeah, and we have a group out of Colorado. It's Brian Kurth, who runs Revere Software, that's actually doing all of our beta testing rounds. So he actually wants from each of our groups, including survivors, to actually beta test and knock holes in it. So he's over that. And you always ask me 2 questions, and I always forget what they do.
The hotel, like
Yes.
pairing, like who like pay for the hotel nights, and like are there like a limit? Like is it 1 night or 2 nights? Like because you obviously want to get people into a plan. Like you mentioned.
Yes. So when we started this program, it was a sanctuary program. There was no technology at all. And it was just me and my husband basically funding. It's called the Santana Fund, and we put the money off to the side. We've been funding it, but then we said, partners, it's time for you to step up. So we fundraise, we get grants, we get donations, and we have that partnership buy-in, like I was sharing with you before, and that helps to pay for the hotel rooms. The program that we have right now, the sanctuary program, is it's 1 to 5 days. Our goal on the 5th day is to make sure that these survivors are now in some sort of safe placed housing. So whether it be with family, whether it be in a shelter, whether it be with a hotel, with our advocate, we want to make sure that those things are happening. And of course there are extenuating circumstances that may take it beyond 5 days. So like we had a client that she had a drug and alcohol dependence issue. It's going to take longer because she had to get into detox. You can't start dealing with people until you deal with people, you know what I mean? It's like I have to figure out what's going on with her so that we can actually figure the next of it out. So we got her into detox, and then she came back to our program. So sometimes it's longer, but our basic program, it's going to show some stuff. Our basic program.
We've already seen it, yep.
Our basic program is 1 to 5 days. And I tell people all the time, it's not to keep people. Our goal is placement. We want to get them placed and then start working through things. And actually, the government and the way they fund is actually moving towards that. It's rapid rehousing. Let's get them into permanent living situations, because that homelessness and that, I guess, lack of resources, a lot of the driving factor in a lot of these things. We're discovering, too, that a lot of our survivors are homeless when they come to us. So it's not, I'm becoming homeless because of this. They've been squatting. They've been in this kind of cycling of life of homelessness for a minute, and we are hoping to address that issue so that we'll end it.
Really
Very inspiring.
Oh,
For the end of the year.
okay, for the end of the year. What happened to the formatting on this one?
Oh, it's
whatever.
It's horrible. This is a
We didn't see
horrible
this one.
thing.
It's fine.
Good, I'm glad you did. Wow, okay, but I do want you to see that.
Oh, wow.
So this is what the app is actually gonna look like once you get to see it. The victim side, it's like a chat. So it's like, I'm your advocate. Hi, my name is Cynthia. Cynthia's your advocate, and she goes through. When an advocate meets with a victim, we develop what we call our 13-point strategic plan. It's called our GRACE method. When our ladies around the table, we sat down and said, what does the survivor need to address when they leave their violence? What does that look like? So we came up with 13 areas, so like housing, transportation, schooling, like all of these things is part of us building that strategic plan. Once we build the strategic plan, we upload it, and then we have conversations back and forth with the victim saying, hey, this is what your strategic plan is. How is that? This is the resource. Do you need help? Just kind of walking along with them and giving them alerts, saying, hey, this is what's going on. You haven't had that appointment. Is there a mobility issue? Can you not get to it? How can we help? But they're in charge. Really, at the end of the day, they're in charge of their own success. So they have to be self-sufficient, and they have to decide they want it. this is the web interface. So first responders, this is what they would actually see. So remember I was telling you about the availability portion. The availability is high at the Shelter Hotel in Los Angeles. So if they call there, they might just get in. If they go to this one, the availability is low, so why even bother calling, because you're not going to get in. So our goal is to keep them, I guess, keep what's available visible to them without them having to jump through a bunch of hoops to get to it. Up in the corner, Amanda Thrive is our advisor, our advocate, and she's the person who's talking to Cynthia Doe. We know where her location is. That's the other thing. With this, we asked them to turn their location trackers on their phones off. And we also asked them, you know, we don't find out what their location is until it's time for us to pick them up for their safety sake and for our safety sake. We asked them how many kids how many kids they have. That says occupation. I think our developers get a little excited. That's not going to be on there. And we have very little information when we first meet the person. Once we actually do the full strategic 13-point, then we'll know more. And then we can see that chat right there is in this bottom corner. So they can see all of that information on the web app. So there are two different things. So one is a web app and one is an actual app. Does that make sense? Yes.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand, so who initiates contact in terms of saying that they need placement? Would it be the people who support the survivors or the survivors themselves? Are they going to have already known access to that app? Or is it like the shelters and centers contacting y'all to connect to you?
Right now, what we're asking our shelter, our partners, is for them to contact us so that we can vet them properly and make sure that they are, in fact, needing our services. Because some people have found out about us, and they were like, hey, are you guys the ones that give out the hotel rooms? We're like, no, we're not the ones that give out the hotel rooms. So with law enforcement will actually give this. It's okay.
That's my reminder.
Man, no, it's okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. So law enforcement will actually vet them for us, and then they will provide the app. They'll say, hey, download this link or the phone or whatever. We're trying to take out those barriers to getting access to this. So, and make sure that they have been vetted properly so they're not just people trying to take advantage of the system. Because we have folks who have figured us out already, and I was like, we have been doing this but like a year, and they're just like, yeah. They have them call our hotline, and they're like, hey, do you have hotel rooms? And we're like, that's not how this works. No. Are you on a wait list somewhere? I have to be on a wait list? Yeah, I gotta go. So yeah, we're figuring it out. But with shelters, like for example, we had a conversation with SAFE. We've got to figure out how to maintain client confidentiality, and that's huge, right? And privacy and safety, so we're working with them as well. And we've been speaking with NNEDV up in Washington to help us to develop more safety parameters. But privacy and safety is of the utmost for us. And confidentiality, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Did I answer your question, Courtney?
Yeah.
Good, thanks. No problem, Courtney. I love when another Courtney's in the room. I get to say my name. Courtney. Did anybody else have any other questions about this?
No, it's wonderful.
You guys have
Everybody
Facebook
spread the
page?
word.
Thank you.
And donate to
Yes.
Survive2Thrive Foundation.
Yes.
You guys have Facebook or LinkedIn?
Yes, we're all on Facebook. So Facebook, it's Survive2Thrive Foundation. LinkedIn is Survive2Thrive Foundation. Twitter, it's S2T Foundation. And Instagram, it's S2T Foundation. We try to keep it consistent, but our name is really long. So that's what it is.
So I like that too in the middle of it. That really
It's pretty
stands
snazzy,
out.
right?
Very
And yellow.
snazzy.
Hey. Did you have a question, sir?
Oh, no, but do you have a business card?
I don't, but I'm going to give you my information.
I'd love to get your contact information.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, I hope you guys will please share information. I'll get my information to Carolyn, and please shoot it out there. We are looking for donations still. We are looking to launch nationally summer 2019 in our pilot cities. Oh my gosh. I keep saying that out loud. It makes me want to faint. 4 cities nationally, and then after that, we're going national in the next 2 years, by 2020. But thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. is, has been recorded by Capital Factory, and it's on Austin Tech Live. So you
Thank
can
you.
also share it online. And so, we appreciate Capital Factory. I hope they're listening.
Thank you, Capital Factory, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm your fan. Do you need me to sweep something or clean something? Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you for bringing me presents. You have to bring me
Hey,
presents.
thanks.
Thank you so much for coming.
I'll spread it around, and
Yeah.
I'm unfortunately have to go.
Yeah.
Yes.
But,
Yes, thank
but I'll
you.
email you and enjoy your silly presents. I love this, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
I think there's someone that you work with, Amanda Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
I actually told her about this, and I don't know.
Yeah, such a good idea. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So, contact information from them.
Yes.
But I'm I think at NTEN in Columbus. We do a lot of work with like nonprofits and startups, like projects, and that kind of like research projects.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah, give me your card because I know I don't have mine, but I will email you guys tonight.
Yeah, I don't have a card.